What's up guys, my name is Liam, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Pulsar Xlite V3 and the Pulsar Xlite V3 ES. These have been some of my favorite Ergo releases of the year, but do one of these have the potential to be the perfect gaming mouse for you? Let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that Pulsar did send this out to me. However, everything you're going to be seeing in this video is going to be my own thoughts and my own opinions. And here is a really quick shot on what the box looks like in case you wanted to read any of the details. Included in the box for these, they both do get a user manual, a sticker. They each have their own unique trading card. And with the original version, you just get the 1K dongle and the dongle adapter. And since I got the white version, it does come with a white USB-C cable. The ES version, however, it does come with the black cable, USB-C, and it does include the 4K dongle if you wanted to pick up the 4K dongle. For the original Xlite V3, you do have to purchase that separately. Starting over at the bottom of these mice, real simple stuff on the Xlite V3, the original version, you just have the power button over here and then the DPI button over here on the right side, and it does have these cutouts. The skates on here are okay. They're a little bit the harsher style skates, a little bit faster than the 100% Virgin PTFE skates, but a little bit more harsh as well. And then basically the same thing as far as the power button and the DPI button goes over here on the ES version, same skates. The one difference, however, is it does have this LCD screen down at the bottom. And the one thing about this version is this does not work with the software. This only works specifically through the mouse. So to go over the functions really quick, this button right down here at the bottom, it's not going to work because I don't have the dongle hooked up. But when you do have the dongle hooked up, this will actually change the polling rate. As you can see, I have it currently set to the 4000 hertz. Over here, it does change the DPI. If you were to hold the polling rate button and press the DPI button, it does change the click to bounce setting. As you can see there, I prefer to have it set to 0 milliseconds. And then other functions, if I were to hold the bottom and press mouse button number 1, it does turn off or on motion sync, and then hold it again and press mouse button number 2 over here. It does change the actual liftoff distance. There might be other functions on here, but that's all I really need to play around with to get the typical type of settings that I do like to have on the mouse. The shell integrity and overall build quality on both of my units feels spot on. They're incredibly solid. I don't notice any type of flexing, bending, anything like that at all whatsoever with the way that I grip the mouse and use it personally. These both do have slightly different coatings, however. As you can clearly see here over on the ES version, the type of procedure that they use, it does kind of collect more fingerprints. And in my opinion, straight out of the box, I did feel like this coating did feel a little bit more grippy and a little bit more premium. I was messing around with getting my hands wet, and unfortunately the coating isn't as grippy when you do get your hands really wet. So if you do struggle with having really sweaty hands, something you might want to take into consideration. But again, out of the box, it felt incredible. The more that you use it and the more that you get kind of like this grease on here and stuff like that, the coating does kind of tend to get a little bit more slippery for me. But once you wipe it down and clean it off, it kind of goes right back to where it was. And the coating on this, to me, it kind of feels like it's a little bit more rubberized, but the coating on the original version does seem a little bit more matte. It doesn't appear to get as dirty for me, and I didn't notice myself having to clean it off as often as I did on the ES version. Both of these mice are using the same Razer optical switches. I'm not sure if that's exactly how you pronounce the name, but over here on both my copies, if I were to click in the middle of the button, there's a slight bit of play. I do feel like the click implementation on both of these mice, they do feel better than my Pulsar X2 V2, my X2H Mini, and my X2H. I have been enjoying them slightly a bit more, and the click implementation is really solid from front to back. It does get a little bit more heavy up here at the top, but as far as these buttons go, you don't notice a whole lot of left to right play, a whole lot of rocking. So all around, everything feels really good. If you were to come up towards the front, you do get just slightly a little bit more play, as you can see there, but that's typical on most other mice. I ran a poll on my YouTube not that long ago on whether you guys prefer mechanical switches or the optical switches, and I must say, for optical switches compared to everything else that's out there on the market, these don't feel that bad. They feel pretty good, but in my personal opinion, I really do prefer the feeling of the mechanical switches. I do feel like on the Vaxi Outset AX that the clicks just feel much lighter and they're much easier to spam. Again, you can still do it here on the Pulsar, but overall I just feel like you get a much easier experience with the mechanical switches on this one. And when it comes to the scroll wheels, as you can clearly see, the ES has this big metallic aluminum style scroll wheel on it. And I'll be honest with you, when you're scrolling these side by side, if you were to scroll it perfectly, the aluminum scroll wheel does feel a little bit more smooth and a little bit more premium just with the way that it scrolls. But overall, I've never really been much of a fan of these metallic style scroll wheels in gameplay. I must say I do really like this. Out of all the metallic scroll wheels out there, I just did my WL mouse video. I said that had a pretty good metallic scroll. I do feel like this is the best metallic scroll wheel that I have used. I do feel like it is the lightest weight and it has these really big notches in there. So I didn't have too bad of a time getting a grip on the actual scroll wheel itself. But like I said, no matter what you do to this thing, if you were to use a light grip and barely graze over the top of the scroll wheel, as you can see there, I can rub across it without even scrolling it. So if you are using these metallic scroll wheels, you absolutely have to put more pressure into them. You cannot be as light as them as you can if they have a rubber ring around them. So even though this metallic scroll wheel does feel good in my opinion, again, I do prefer the rubberized one. And typical things with the other Pulsar mice, they have this new blue encoder in here. I really do feel like it's great. The defined steps are there, they're lightweight, but very easy to spam and no issues with this blue encoder on these newer Pulsar mice. The side buttons on both my copies feel very similar. You do get a slight bit of play there with the pre-travel, and if I were to push from the side, I do feel like you get a little bit more towards the rear, but nothing too bad from back to front. All around they feel really solid. When you do press them in, I don't really feel any type of teetering there. So aside from them having a little bit of pre-travel, there is very minimal post-travel. And overall, the implementation on both of these, they do feel pretty good. So let's go ahead and drop the sound test for the clicks and the build quality. So when it comes to the weight and balance, I would say that's absolutely one of the biggest things that separates both of these, in my opinion. The ES version, it does come with a 500 milliamp hour battery. So with that and the screen and all this extra stuff without having the cutouts on here, it does obviously add some additional weight. So if you do care more about having a longer battery life, or even if you're somebody who does prefer more of a heavier weight style mouse, then the ES could potentially be a better option for you. Looking at the overall weight here, looks like I got it coming in at 66.2 grams. So when it does come to the original version, this is actually using a 300 milliamp hour battery on it. With this 300 milliamp hour battery, I was getting about 2 to 3 days of use. With the 500 milliamp hour battery, you're gonna get about like 4 to 5 days of use, I'd say. So with the cutouts and the smaller battery in here, looks like I got it coming in at about 55.8 grams, but that's not the only difference. This weight does actually impact the overall balance. On my copy of the original V3, I feel like it does have a perfect front to back balance, and it even has a perfect left to right balance. Coming over here to the ES version, with that screen and the bigger battery in the back, I do feel like there is a noticeable difference to where it does feel more rear heavy, but they did seem to nail down the left to right balance on it. The ES does have an option to where if you were to use it wired, you can use it with an 8K polling rate. I personally would rather use 4K wireless than to use 8K wired. That's just my own personal preference. But like I had mentioned earlier, when it comes to the software, the ES version, it does not work at all with the software. You can only adjust the settings through the bottom functions of the mouse, but with the original Xlite V3, similar stuff to the X2 V2 and the X2H, the software on here is incredibly easy to do. Same stuff as I typically do. I drop the debounce setting down to 0 milliseconds, adjust my DPI and the 4K polling rate, and then these are the preferable options that I use when I was gaming with this mouse. And of course, the 4K and 8K performance on both of these mice in-game felt spot on to me. And when it comes to the shape, this is a very known and loved shape, as you've probably seen all the other reviewers talking about. This is basically a Zowie EC2 clone, so I don't want to get too much into that since everybody's already covered it. But one thing I did want to mention is they did make some slight changes from the original Xlite V2, so let's talk about those. When I grip this mouse, I tend to grip it more up at the front like this. And these holes right here, they kind of bothered me a little bit on the Xlite V2. When you look at the new Xlite V3 version, it's not as rounded as it is over here on the front. As you can see here, there's kind of more of a point, and there's kind of a little bit of a ledge right there before it curves in to the side. So it still is rounded, but not as rounded. And I do feel like when I grip up on the front in this new version, I don't have to worry about the holes being there, and you get a little bit more of a ledge. So I feel like it's a little bit easier for me to grip and gives you a little bit more additional support. So if you did love the original Xlite V2, you're still going to get that great shape, just a little bit better and more redefined in my opinion. And next up, when comparing it to the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro. As much as I love the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro, I do feel like for my hand size, it is just seems like it's a little bit too large. As you can see down here on the bottom profile, it does look a bit longer. Trying to put them together in the most narrow point in the middle here, again, I do feel like the DeathAdder V3 Pro is a little bit more wide. And then looking at both of these from the rear, the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro, everything about this mouse just seems like it's a little bit more aggressive with the curves to me. And then finally looking at both of these on the side is where you can see that the Dave 3 Pro just is a little bit of a larger mouse. And then finally, when comparing it to the Lamzu Thorn, these are two of my favorite Ergo releases of the year. When holding both of these in the hands, one of the things that I do notice about this bottom curve profile is I do feel like the width of the rear here does kind of stand out to me more, whereas the Xlite V3, it just kind of feels a little bit more narrow in your hands. By looking at the curve profile from the rear, I do feel like on the Pulsar Xlite V3, it does kind of drop off towards the right side and curve down a little bit more aggressively. And finally, when looking at both these from the side, I do feel like the top of the Lamzu Thorn is more rounded, and it kind of sticks out this hump right here when I'm holding it. So the fact that the Xlite V3 is a little bit flatter in that area right there, again, when you're just holding this in the hands, I do feel like the Xlite V3 kind of helps out a little bit more if you want to do like a fingertip grip, if you want to do an aggressive claw grip, and you can easily palm the Xlite V3 as well. And again, with this hump right here on the Lamzu Thorn, even though you still can fingertip grip this mouse, I do kind of feel like that hump right there, you do kind of notice it, especially if you're to do some type of a relaxed claw. My grip that I personally like on the Lamzu Thorn is I kind of feel like I have to move up a little bit more and go into more of a palm style grip when I'm using it. So that's pretty much one of the biggest differences here between these two shapes, in my opinion, when it comes to the overall usability of them. Alright guys, so that wraps things up on the Pulsar Xlite V3 and the Pulsar Xlite V3 ES. I do plan on releasing a video where I'll be ranking all of the Ergo releases that I got my hands on that did come out this year, in my personal opinion on how I feel about them. And I must say that I really do love the Pulsar Xlite V3, both of them very much. And my opinion on both of them is that they are both great. I really kind of wish that Pulsar would have done something with the screen on the actual dongle itself. And if they could have matched the weight on both of these, or I would say get the ES version within just a couple of grams of the original Xlite V3 version, I do think that it would have kind of made this mouse just a little bit more optimal in my opinion. Now for me personally, I do prefer to play faster paced, high tracking games like Apex Legends. So going back and forth, both these felt great, but at the end of the day, I did come to find that I did prefer the original Xlite V3. I just felt like it was a little bit easier to track with, and having about 10 grams less weight really did feel optimal with me, on top of the fact that this does have a rubberized scroll wheel. But if you play games like Counter-Strike, Valorant, or something like that, you don't mind the weight, you don't mind the metal scroll wheel, and you do prefer having the little bit more of an extra battery life here, then I do still feel like the ES version is overall a really great buy. All right guys, so if you have any questions, I feel like I left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. If you are interested in picking up any of these mice and supporting the channel, I've left affiliate links down in the description below. And if you've enjoyed watching this video and are interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.